Colchester, a town that carries centuries of history, Roman ruins, cobbled streets, and a sense of calm that only places this old can project. But in the spring of 2014, that calm was shattered. In the early hours of March 29th, the town woke up to a crime scene so brutal, so senseless, that even seasoned officers couldn't hold back their shock. This is the story of Jim Attfield, a father, a survivor, a man trying to piece together his life. Until one night in a quiet park, someone turned his world and his body into a crime scene.
Welcome to Dark Chronicles, where shadows hide the truth.
Jim was 33 years old, a father of 5, a karaoke lover. Friendly, kind, the type of guy you'd meet once and remember. 4 years earlier, he had been struck by a car. The accident left him in a coma for 8 weeks. When he woke up, everything was different. His memory gone, his speech changed, his mobility limited. And worst of all, he no longer recognized his own children. He had to start over from zero. And he did, bit by bit. With physical rehab, he gained strength. With time, he gained hope. He was living in semi-supported housing. He was trying, he was fighting. And after years of recovery, something big was about to happen. A reunion. Jim had been planning to meet his children again. For the first time, he would know them, remember them, hug them, not as strangers, but as dad. That moment was just days away. March 28th, 2014. A Friday night. Jim stopped by his local pub, the River Lodge, for a few drinks. Regular place, regular crowd. CCTV later confirmed everything seemed normal. He left shortly before 1 a.m., taking the shortcut home through Castle Park. It's a grassy open space in the middle of Colchester. Trees, a few paths, and at night, total darkness. Jim, a little drunk, stopped to lie down on the grass. Just for a minute, maybe to sober up, maybe to enjoy the quiet. A passerby asked if he was all right. Jim said he was. Then the man walked on. At 5:45 a.m., someone else found him, barely alive, drenched in blood, stabbed 102 times, a number that sounds like a typo but isn't. Police and paramedics rushed to the scene. He fought to hold on. He lasted 45 minutes. Then he died. Just before reaching the hospital, the sheer violence stunned even the most experienced investigators. One officer said he couldn't tell Jim's hair color, his skin color. Everything was red. The injuries were beyond comprehension. Stab wounds to the head, to the chest, to the eyes. His arms slashed as he tried to fight back. It was as if someone had unleashed every ounce of rage they had on a man who couldn't even stand straight. Jim didn't start a fight. He didn't provoke anyone. He didn't deserve any of it. And now the killer was gone. No weapon, no clear motive, no one seen leaving the park. Only a trail of blood and a sea of unanswered questions. Police found a bloody shoe print near the body. More prints leading away. But they didn't lead to a suspect, just footprints into the dark. The town held its breath. Colchester hadn't seen anything like this, ever. Detectives quickly pieced together a narrow window for the murder between 1 a.m. and 5:45 a.m. It was a stretch of darkness, 4.5 hours. Castle Park at that hour is almost a different world. No lights. Thick trees, long shadows, the kind of place where sound travels far but help takes too long to arrive. Investigators reviewed CCTV from surrounding streets. They saw Jim alone at the pub, calm, chatty, a normal night. He left by himself. No one followed, no altercation, no suspicious figures nearby. The attack didn't seem premeditated, or maybe it was so random it couldn't be predicted. Either way, it left no trail. At least not one they could follow. The only witness was the man who had passed Jim just after 1 a.m. the one who asked if he was all right. Police questioned him. His alibi checked out. He was ruled out. That left a chilling void. Jim had been lying alone in the park, half asleep, when someone decided to take his life in the most brutal way imaginable. Not a robbery, not a fight, just rage. The town was gripped with fear. Who would do this and why? To find answers, police combed through every second of available footage. They released images of 23 people spotted near the park that night. Not suspects, just people in the area. They urged them to come forward, clear their names, share anything they might have seen. Few came. Most didn't remember anything helpful. The location of the attack wasn't far from a local school. Parents were shaken. People avoided walking alone. Officers from across East Anglia flooded the area. 3,000 personal alarms were handed out. Streets were patrolled day and night. Jim's background made the case harder. He was soft-spoken, struggled with memory, had few close friends, no recent enemies, and yet someone had murdered him with horrifying precision. What were they dealing with? A random killer? Someone mentally unstable? Or worse, a predator testing how far they could go? Then came June, 3 months later. The fear had begun to fade. The park was slowly returning to normal, until it happened again. A second body, another stabbing, just as brutal. And this time, broad daylight, June 17, 2014. The victim was 31-year-old Nahid Al-Manea, a PhD student from Saudi Arabia. She was studying at the University of Essex and had been walking along the Salary Brook Trail, a quiet, tree-lined path that connected her student housing to campus. At 10:40 a.m., a local man searching for his cat found her. Face destroyed, eyes stabbed, skull fractured, blood everywhere. There was no time for paramedics. She was already gone. 16 stab wounds. 2 of them fatal. Same method. Same kind of frenzied violence. Same area. The town's fear, once dormant, returned in full force. 2 killings, 1 town, 3 months apart. It felt like a serial killer's signature. Detectives scrambled. Was this random again? Or was Nahid targeted? She wore traditional Islamic clothing. Some wondered if it was a hate crime. Others weren't so sure. Her route was familiar, safe. She walked it often with her brother. But that morning she was alone, like Jim. A witness had seen a man running away. Thin build, hoodie, carrying a bag. He vanished into the neighborhood. A vague description, no arrest. But now the possibility was real. 1 person, 2 victims. Police admitted the cases were being looked at in parallel. Not yet officially linked, but hard to ignore the overlap. Open areas, knife attacks, eyes targeted. No motive, no suspects. The message was clear. Something was stalking Colchester. The city was on edge. 2 lives taken. 2 brutal attacks. No answers. People were locking their doors tighter, skipping usual walking routes and scanning over their shoulders in broad daylight. The police were under pressure. National media picked up the story. Crime Watch featured Jim's case, hoping for a lead, but nothing came. Then Nahid was murdered, and the fear turned into urgency. It was no longer just a local mystery, it was a national concern. Officers from across eastern England joined the investigation. Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, Norfolk, Suffolk. They all sent help. Profilers from the National Crime Agency were brought in. Everything pointed to a high-risk offender. Someone impulsive, violent, and disturbingly controlled. They theorized the killer may have worn gloves. There were no prints, no DNA, no weapon. It didn't make sense. For someone to be so reckless, so frenzied, yet leave no evidence, that wasn't luck. That was planning. Detectives began re-interviewing earlier persons of interest. One of them was a 15-year-old boy. He had a record: robbery with a knife, breaking into homes. But when questioned about Nahid's death, he claimed he was home. No one could prove otherwise. He was released. For nearly a year, the case stalled. Over 900 people were interviewed. Hundreds of doors were knocked on. Still no suspect, no charges. And then, by chance, the killer made a mistake. Not in the act, but in his preparation for the next one. May 26, 2015. Almost a year since Nahid was murdered. Michelle Sadler was walking her dog near the Salary Brook Trail, the same path Nahid had taken, the same place her body was found. Michelle noticed a teenage boy standing on a footbridge, not moving, just staring. Something about him felt wrong. He looked tense, nervous, like he was waiting. And the way he watched her, it made her skin crawl. She walked away quickly, then stopped. She turned around. He was no longer on the bridge. He was now under a tree, crouching, peeking through branches. Michelle did something many people wouldn't. She acted on instinct. She called 999, reported what she saw, described the jacket, the gloves, the way he moved. Police responded within minutes. PC Loomis was nearby. He found the boy and asked a simple question: was everything okay? The boy said he was just clearing his head, that he didn't feel quite right. The officer noticed the gloves, the thick jacket on a warm day. He asked if the boy had anything on him. The teen said yes, a knife. That moment saved lives. The teenager was James Fairweather, just 16 years old, the same boy questioned a year earlier and released. At first, police thought they'd simply caught someone carrying a weapon. But then came the interview and the confession. Cold, calm, detailed. He admitted to killing Jim. Then Nahid. He explained everything. The voices, the rage, the planning. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a mission. He believed he was chosen by evil, that the voices in his head gave him a task, that Jim was a sacrifice, that Nahid was a message. He even said he wanted to kill again. He had been preparing for his third victim. Michelle may have been that victim. She later said, "I think I saved my own life." And she wasn't wrong. James described how he crept out of his house through a window the night he killed Jim. Armed, ready, hunting. How he watched Jim lying in the grass, listened for his breath, then stabbed him over and over, the laughter in his head getting louder. How he only stopped when Jim began to die. That's when the town realized the killer had never left. He was just a boy, a neighbor, already questioned, already free. James Fairweather's confession wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't dramatic, it was matter-of-fact, chilling in its clarity. He told detectives that after killing Jim, he returned home like nothing had happened. He washed the knife, threw it into a river, bagged up his blood-stained clothes and left them with the neighborhood rubbish. No panic, no remorse, just a method. And then he waited. 3 months later, he struck again, Nahid Almanea. He spotted her on her usual walk along the Salary Brook Trail. He said the voices told him to attack her, that she shouldn't have been walking alone. He knocked her sunglasses off to stab her in the eyes. A detail so cruel even seasoned officers recoiled. He said it with no emotion, just logistics. She would have lived if she had chosen a different route. That was his logic. In the 11 months between Nahid's murder and his arrest, James said he thought about killing again every single day. His head was filled with graphic, violent urges. He described them vividly. He wanted to rape, burn, torture, destroy. He fantasized about mutilation, acid, babies, teachers, prostitutes. He said the only way to silence the voices was to feed them with violent video games and explicit content. But even that was beginning to lose effect. He was a ticking bomb. One more day, one more chance, and someone else would have died. Maybe Michelle, maybe someone else entirely. The psychological profile painted a disturbing picture. James wasn't just violent, he was obsessed. He idolized serial killers. He researched them constantly. Ted Bundy, the Yorkshire Ripper, Ian Huntley, Myra Hindley. He kept files. He had pictures. He took notes. He even looked up how to plead diminished responsibility in court. He was planning for the aftermath before he got caught. He wanted to be caught, but only after reaching a body count high enough to matter. In custody, his defense team pushed for a mental health argument. They claimed he was psychotic, that he wasn't in control, that he didn't understand what he was doing. Multiple psychiatrists were brought in. Some said he was on the autism spectrum. Others described him as isolated, bullied, traumatized by his grandmother's death. They called it the perfect storm of mental illness and circumstance. But prosecutors pushed back. Hard. Dr. Philip Joseph, a court-appointed psychiatrist, testified that James was not psychotic, that his voices shifted too much, sometimes internal, sometimes external, that he gave different stories at different times, and most of all, his memory was perfect. He recalled every detail, every movement, every decision. He cleaned up, hid evidence, researched how to manipulate the system. This wasn't compulsion. It was calculation. The court was shown James's original police interview. Calm, detailed, not a hint of distress. Just a boy explaining how he stabbed 2 people to death and got away with it. The jury didn't buy the defense, not for a second. In April 2016, James Fairweather, now 17, was found guilty of both murders. The verdict was unanimous. The judge handed down 2 life sentences, with a minimum term of 27 years. After that, if ever released, he would remain on lifetime license subject to conditions and ready to be recalled to prison at any time. James didn't react. He shrugged, looked at his parents, and mouthed the words, "Don't give a blank." But the courtroom did react. Jim Attfield's mother stood strong as she read her statement, her voice steady, her pain visible. She said Jim had fought so hard to rebuild his life, that he had overcome unimaginable challenges, and that he didn't deserve to be taken by someone so young, so cruel, so empty. She called James Fairweather a monster, and she meant every word. The trial ended, but the story didn't. Because after all the facts, all the forensic analysis and the psychiatric reports, people were still asking the same question. How did this happen? How did a 15-year-old boy turn into a double murderer without anyone noticing? And more importantly, could it have been prevented? The police faced scrutiny. James Fairweather had already been interviewed once in connection with Naheed's murder. He lived near the scene, had a criminal record, had shown signs of violence. But because he claimed to be home that day, and no evidence said otherwise, he was dismissed. He wasn't eliminated, just overlooked. That revelation hit hard. Had someone looked closer, had someone dug deeper, Jim's death might not have been the first, and Naheed might have lived. Still, police stood by their work. They had interviewed over 900 people, tracked hundreds of leads. They said Fairweather didn't stand out. Not until that final day when Michelle saw something she couldn't unsee, when her gut told her something wasn't right, and she acted on it. That single call stopped a spree. Experts agree James wasn't finished. He said himself that he had plans, fantasies. His next victim could have been anyone, a jogger, a child, an elderly woman, anyone who crossed his path while the voices were screaming. His thrill came not just from killing, but from watching the chaos afterward. He collected media clippings, tracked every update. He was proud of what he had done. Not remorseful. Not sorry, proud. The judge recognized that. In his sentencing, he said Fairweather's actions were sadistic and horrific. That his calmness, his planning, and his cold detachment removed any doubt about mental illness as a defense. He said autism, while part of Fairweather's condition, did not excuse or diminish the responsibility for what he did. That thousands of people live with autism without ever hurting anyone. That to suggest otherwise would be a dangerous and unjust narrative. And so, James Fairweather became one of the youngest people in the UK to ever receive a double life sentence for murder. A teenage serial killer in the making, stopped just in time. But for the families of Jim Attfield and Nahid Almania, the damage was already done. Jim's mother described her son as kind and brave, a man who had already survived the worst and was trying to build something better. He was days away from reuniting with his children. He had overcome a brain injury, rebuilt his independence, and still found joy in karaoke and laughing with strangers. His death felt like a robbery, not just of life, but of redemption. Nahid's brother, still grieving, spoke of her academic drive, her dedication, her kindness. She had come to the UK to study, to learn, to grow. She loved her university, her classes, and her future. It was all taken from her in minutes, for nothing. And then there was Michelle Sadler, the woman whose gut instinct saved lives. She didn't receive the reward money because she called the police directly instead of the anonymous tip line. That decision cost her £20,000. But she doesn't regret it. She said she didn't do it for money. She did it because she believed she was about to die. She saw something dark in that boy's eyes, and she listened to her fear. The town of Colchester hasn't forgotten. Memorials were held, tributes paid. But even now, years later, you can feel the aftershock. The fear that comes from realizing monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're kids, with backpacks and notebooks and dead eyes. What James Fairweather took from that town wasn't just lives. It was safety, it was certainty, and those things are much harder to replace. As the years pass, people sometimes forget the details of a crime, but they never forget how it made them feel. In Colchester, the memory of what happened in 2014 doesn't fade. It lingers. In Castle Park, where Jim bled for hours before dying. On the Salary Brook Trail, where Nahid's body was found broken in the daylight. These are no longer just walking paths. They are markers of grief, of violence, of a fear that once spread like wildfire through a community that had always believed it couldn't happen here. But it did. And the person responsible was someone most people would have walked past without a second glance. A teenage boy, shy, quiet, angry, obsessed. At just 15, James Fairweather turned his fascination with serial killers into a mission. A mission that began with stalking, watching, selecting, and ended with 102 stab wounds to a sleeping man's body. His crimes weren't fueled by poverty, or revenge, or desperation. They were fueled by something colder, a dark fantasy life, a lust for control, a belief that killing gave him power. He said he heard voices. He said they told him to kill. But those same voices also told him how to hide evidence, how to lie to police, how to fake normal. And that's the part that leaves people unsettled, because James wasn't out of control. He was hiding it. He was waiting for the next chance. He told officers that if he hadn't been caught that May morning, he would have killed at least 15 people, maybe more. He wanted a body count. He wanted to be famous. He wanted his name in the history books next to the killers he admired, the ones he studied, the ones he envied. What makes his story even more terrifying is how close he came to getting away with it. Remember, he had already been interviewed once. He had been released. And in the months between Nahid's murder and his arrest, there were no leads, no evidence. If not for Michelle Sadler's call, he might still be out there, still watching, still planning, still waiting for the voices to whisper again. That one phone call made on instinct broke the silence and saved lives. But justice, as clear as it was in the courtroom, can never fully repair what was lost. Jim Attfield's children will grow up without their father. Nahid Almania will never return to Saudi Arabia with her degree. Their families live with the knowledge that their loved ones didn't just die. They suffered, they were hunted. They were taken by someone who never knew them, never hated them, never spoke a word to them, and yet took everything. That randomness, that senselessness is what makes this story hard to let go. It forces us to ask questions we're not ready to answer. How do you spot a killer before he kills? What does evil look like when it wears the face of a teenager, and when justice is served? What do you do with the trauma that still lives in the streets, in the memories, in the DNA of a town? There's no perfect answer. But there is a lesson, a chilling one, that predators don't always come from the outside. Sometimes they grow among us, in classrooms, on buses, in the house down the street, and when they strike, it often isn't with warning. It's with silence, with planning, with the horrifying calm of someone who has been waiting a long time to do something they've already seen in their mind 1,000 times. James Fairweather's name may one day disappear from the headlines, but the names of Jim and Nahid, those should stay. Because they were more than victims. They were real people. A karaoke-loving father who fought through brain trauma to rebuild his life. A brilliant PhD student with dreams that stretched across continents. They deserve to be remembered not for how they died, but for who they were before a boy with a knife tried to rewrite their stories. Colchester remembers.
So that's how the crimes end, and if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you want me to do some special crimes in all over the world, comment down below, or you can send us direct through email, and I will see you in all my videos. See ya!